My mum and dad are from Ukraine. They came after World War II as displaced persons, and so they came to Australia. My mum and dad actually met here in Australia.
Oh, that's romantic.
And then I was born here.
Yeah.
And then my children.
I'm second generation Ukrainian
immigrant
here in Australia, but my parents also met through the Ukrainian community here in Sydney.
Yeah, we went to Ukrainian school.
So I'm all Ukrainian. I'm Ukrainian background on both sides, mum and dad's. But we met through here, and our grandparents built this community. They came from Ukraine after World War II as displaced people, and they built our church and they built this culture here. They built the diaspora here in Australia so that they could pass it on to their children and they could pass it on to us in turn.
And I'm teaching my grandchildren now.
Wow. So even it takes even 4 generations, the culture has not even lost a bit. It's just everything is so well preserved with so many difficult details to deal with, but
some
still,
of these eggs are 46 years old.
Yeah.
Wow. And still, Ukrainian cultural heritage is 5 stars, 100 out of 100. I'm like, that's incredible. Like, you move to a different country and you not only adapt to a new culture, but preserve your culture 100% well. That's, wow.
Well, because I was sent to Ukrainian school, and then I married a Ukrainian boy who I met through the Ukrainian community. We had children, we sent our children to Ukrainian school. They went to Ukrainian dancing and the youth groups and everything.
And that's how we've learned the culture.
They've learned the language, the culture through that. Yeah.
Wow, it's like you sort of move like a little Ukraine from Ukraine to Australia. You build your own Ukrainian here, and you're just, wow. I mean, just a little, like, not as formal question as the question I asked you before, but more like a joke. And I'm curious, because of this kind of culture in heritage thing, would Ukrainian people prefer to just marry with a Ukraine or with another Ukrainian, or they prefer to date?
It depends on the era.
In my generation, our parents came from Ukraine. We basically went to church, Ukrainian school, all of those things. We did a lot in the Ukrainian community. And so our parents would very much encourage us to possibly marry another Ukrainian. And then it goes on to the next generation. I did marry another Ukrainian who I met through the community. And then it goes on to the next generation, and you go, well, as far as I'm concerned, they can marry who they want. And they don't have to be Ukrainian. But a lot, because they are active in the community, my daughter and my son's group of friends have married other Ukrainians because they were active in that community. Their parents were active, they brought the kids along, they met, and that's how,
But likewise, a lot of people my generation who did grow up in the Ukrainian community have chosen to marry outside of the community. But every one of my friends who are married to somebody who's not Ukrainian, their partners have very happily and willingly taken on the culture and embraced that. So my sister-in-law, she's Italian, but she will along with my brother, and now is teaching it to my niece and nephew, make the traditional bread at Easter time and take it to church and take it to our Ukrainian church, because it's just as important now for her. She says it's my tradition now too,
because it's her children's tradition.
And so
her children are half Italian and half Ukrainian.
I think if you as it is for any cultural sort of anyone from any cultural background, if it's part of your identity, which I know for a lot of my friends it is, you just want to pass it on, and your partner, whether they're Ukrainian or not, will want to be able to help you to do that to the next generation.
I see. So it's more about preserve the culture from generation to generation rather than inheritage the Ukrainian human blood. It's not like that.
It's not about that. And for I can speak on behalf of myself and a lot of my friends, because I've had this conversation with them. For us here in Australia and in Sydney, it's not just about the culture and the identity of being an Australian Ukrainian. It's about preserving what our grandparents built in this country. because they were displaced people. They had very little. You know, my grandmother, my mother's mother, who's still alive, she'll be 99 in a month's time. You know, she was a widower with a child.
Was a widow.
Widow, sorry. And after World War II, Australia was the only country that would take her with
Really?
a child. A single
She
woman
was
with
in
a child.
she was in Germany in a displaced persons camp. Her first husband died a month after my brother was born. Her son was born, and America, Canada, UK would only take couples or single men, but not a woman on her own, and certainly not a woman with a
Wait,
child.
that's like gender discrimination. That's
No,
it's
No,
all-
it was just a
because
very different time.
They needed
They needed
people
workers.
who could work. And
Oh, I mean,
Australia,
women can work.
This is true, but she had a child.
She had a small child.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So like
So
it's a country. I guess.
they took single people, single women as well,
Yes.
but just with a
Not
small
a
child.
woman with
Yeah,
a child.
Yes.
I
So
see.
Australia did, and
Yeah.
she came out here, and to this day, like every Australia Day, she says, you know, I'm thankful, very thankful to Australia. And she said, I'm so glad that I came here. She said, not America or Canada or England. She said, because the life that we built here is really wonderful. And we are a very multicultural society in Australia. And she said, it's been wonderful. She's embraced the Australian together with her Ukrainian.
But that's why it's so important for us as second generation Ukrainians, because our grandparents literally built this community
Yeah.
from the ground up. They came here and they worked on factories or on the railways or in houses, domestic cleaners. They were not professionals. They worked hard and they worked to make a better life for their children and us in turn. And so for us, learning the culture and preserving the culture in Australia is about preserving their legacy just as much as it is about preserving the Ukrainian culture.
Wow, what a speech! I mean.